India's defense outlook has undergone a tremendous change, and it's now cast in stone in a way. India cannot depend, as we have seen in the case of Ukraine and Russia and Europe. You can't depend on others for your arms and ammunition and platforms. So you have to become Atmanirbharta, and self-reliance is the mantra, which had started fortunately by 2016, 2017. More Indian technology, more Indian firms to be given orders. They also have to step up and make sure that Indian armed forces are ready for the future battle, not for the battle or the war that they fought last. The strategic affairs is a game which has no clear victory or defeat.
So usually we do book reviews, but this time we're changing things up a little bit. We're instead going to do a book preview with Nitin Gokhale. It's been many years since you've been writing. A lot of your books have done phenomenally well. This is going to be your 13th book, but it's coming after a gap of 4 years. And we're going to see a bit of a, flurry of them, I believe, this year.
Well, several things there, yes. Yes, it is coming after a gap of 4 years. Obviously, all of you keep me busy, doing all these 3 portals, 3 websites, and of course, my other engagements on talking to people and meeting people has kept me away from what is my main focus has been since 2014, after I left a regular job, to write books. And I actually wrote 6 books between 2014 and 2021. So yes, this 13th and maybe a 14th book and maybe a 15th book this year in 2025. But yes, certainly 2 books definitely this year. So why I didn't write, I've already mentioned. Book writing is something that you have to get into the mood, basically. Otherwise, you can have all the information, but if you don't feel like it, then you don't write. So writer's block is real, as far as I'm concerned. And that has probably happened for multiple reasons. My own couple of health setbacks, recovering from there. And of course, like I said, the day-to-day engagements.
True. So we're going to quickly get into what are the books on offer this year. You're targeting 2, possibly 3, before we get into the details of this first book.
So one of the things that I had done in 2017 and then updated in 2019 was looking at the Modi government's national security policies and decisions in the first tenure, that is 2014 to 2019, where a flurry of activities happened. Uri, Pathankot, Nagaland cross-border raid. Then, of course, Balakot happened, so I updated that. The anti-satellite test. So all those were, there were episodes from there, but I had also weaved it in between those episodes, the policy consistency or policy direction that the government had taken at that point in time. So now there have been another 5 or 6 years have been added to it, to the Modi government's tenure, the Modi Prime Ministership. So multiple things have happened after 2019. The Department of Military Affairs has been created. The first CDS was appointed. He unfortunately died in a helicopter accident. Then the second CDS has come. He's completing 3 years. The National Security Council Secretariat has been reorganized and expanded. And India's foreign policy has been a roller coaster ride with, of course, Donald Trump as the president now. We don't know which way it is going. We've seen 2 wars in the interim. So all kinds of things. I mean, even the August 5, 2019 decision to abrogate Article 370, all that has happened post my books, the previous books. So I thought I'll take a full preview of 10 years of the Modi tenure or the Modi government's decade of national security reforms, national security restructuring, national security revamping, you want to call it, so 3 R's maybe. And it will encompass not just defense, foreign policy, but also science and technology, cyber, financial, some of it mostly. Internal security has been a big success with the anti-left-wing extremism operations really clocking lots of successes. Some failures, of course, Manipur, J&K, no good follow-up. I mean, you can have opinions on that. So all that will come. But it's a vast canvas, India's foreign policy, why it is what it is right now, and where is it headed. So all that will encompass the first book. The second book is, you are aware that in 2019, I also wrote the biography of RN Kao, the founder of RNAW, India's external intelligence agency. Now, that was based on recollection of his family members, some of his colleagues, subordinates, some records which were publicly available, and his own writing or his own account which he had kept in the Nehru Memorial, now the Prime Minister's Memorial Library and Museum. But he had declassified or released only few files. 4 of those files were supposed to be or are supposed to be released this year in 2025, according to his own instructions left at the Prime Minister's Museum and Library. So I'm hoping to get access to that whenever it's released or whenever it's declassified. It involves or it contains his opinion on the Bangladesh operations, which was his biggest success in 1971. And now with what has happened in Bangladesh, it will be of much interest what he thought that time, post 71 victory. The Sikkim annexation, merger, whatever you want to call it, how RNW played a part. And hopefully the account from his perspective of Mrs. Indira Gandhi's assassination, why it happened, the Khalistani movements, beginning of the Khalistani movement that time, and how he had actually gone to China to start a reconciliation with China at Mrs. Gandhi's instruction, Indira Gandhi's instructions. And he was in Beijing on 31st October 1984 when she was assassinated, and how he rushed back. I mean, that story I've mentioned in the first part. But it's going to be very interesting, and I thought I should, because as a person who's done his first part, I should follow up with the second part involving other material also perhaps, which is publicly available, which is sometimes not publicly available, but people are willing to talk like that. So that's the second one.
All right. So we're living in very interesting times where in 2 months of somebody being a president in the US, the complete foreign policy of that country seems to have been upended. Given this uncertainty, and we've seen, what China has done with its own defense budget. So given where we stand geographically and with so much change happening in the US, as far as defense is concerned and India and its own defense is concerned, how are you trying or planning to put that out in your book? Because that is something that over the last 10 years, there's a lot of policy talk that's happened and implementation too, and changes as well.
Of course. So India's defense outlook has undergone a tremendous change, and it's now cast in stone in a way. I used to say this in 2012, 2013 in various conferences and seminars, that Indian military has started reorienting itself towards looking at the bigger challenge of China rather than being obsessed with Pakistan. Although the polity, the society, everyone till then was still obsessed with Pakistan. So that time people used to laugh and say, I mean, those who didn't know the military, I would like to think that I know the military a little better than most other people. So I knew that. Now, post Galwan, which is exactly 5 years ago in June 2020, and the standoff that has happened, things have changed and the challenge is bigger. The primary adversary is China. Also, India cannot depend, as we have seen in the case of Ukraine and Russia and Europe, you can't depend on others for your arms and ammunition and platforms. So you have to become Atmanirbharta, and self-reliance is the mantra, which had started fortunately by 2016, 2017. So that will form part of it. Then theaterization, as they call it, joint theatres for all the 3 services to come together, optimize their combat potential. That will form part of that. But more than that, it's also the reforms in procurement which should come. It's still very slow. The bureaucracy, both in uniform and in civil segment, still remains obdurate and painfully slow and indecisive. for whatever reasons. I mean, I'm not going into the reasons here, but that is there. So that looking at that, how Ordnance Factory Board was broken up into 7 verticals, and whether they have succeeded somewhere or not succeeded, what is the effect on the private sector, all that will form of the defense thing. And also the personnel reforms in the armed forces, Agniveer, some controversies about the chiefs, all that, and then whether Balakot was not enough to deter Pakistan or deter China, and how China is 5 times bigger than India in terms of economy, in terms of military. So how do you hold on till then? What is the way forward for India? The thaw that occurred in October 2024, how painstakingly it was brought in. So hopefully many of these untold stories from that time, that period, 2020 to 2025, should get included in the book.
It's one thing to talk reform and chart out a course, but quite another to follow through with its implementation. And this is where, you know better than I do that often it's okay to say it, but putting words into action is a whole different gamut altogether.
It's true, and defense will be painfully slow. Like I keep saying that the ship of the Indian state is so large that it takes time to turn. And of course, there is also the chalta hai attitude, which has always been there in the Indian bureaucracy, both in the military also. Those who sign files and make proposals are also very cautious for various historical reasons. But I think on balance, we've achieved in the terms of, in the form of reforms, at least 40 to 50% of what was set out to be done way back in 2016. It needs speeding up, it needs push, and it has to be also the private sector has to step up to meet the challenges. Because now, at least one thing has changed, that it's no longer taboo to be a defense firm, and it's no longer taboo for a military person involved in procurements to meet defense industry executives and go for their tests and trials, which I think is a big change in terms of attitude, in terms of approach to defense procurement. Yeah, you're right. Implementation is the hardest part, but that's why governments are there. I mean, they have to do it. India did the financial reforms in 1991 when pushed to the wall. Here, it's not yet literally pushed to the wall, but things are not very rosy as far as the border dispute and the tension with China and Pakistan are concerned. And the overall uncertainty internationally should compel both the government as well as the armed forces to go in for more Indian technology, more Indian firms to be given orders. They also have to step up and make sure that Indian armed forces are ready for the future battle, not for the battle or the war that they fought last.
True. You mentioned Pakistan and China, and you were saying, we have been so obsessed with Pakistan in the general parlance, but there is China and the factor of China. We've all seen it play out even more publicly since 2020. And in the context of Pakistan and China, what are we likely to see in the book?
So, I won't say theory, but my basis of my book would be that I'm thankful for the incidents in a way which happened in Galwan and around that time, because at least the scales have fallen from the decision makers' eyes and the public's eye, that the obsessive compulsion about Pakistan being in occupying the mind space has gone. Pakistan has actually become so irrelevant in India's public discourse that everybody is looking at China. There is a section which still bashes Pakistan, which still mocks Pakistan. They also like to do that on Kashmir and other places. But there's a fatigue. That's because China is now occupying the mind space. And China is a bigger adversary. It is a primary adversary. I see Pakistan as a subset of the China challenge, rather than there is the nexus between the two, which we have to be aware of, and I'm sure decision makers are aware of. So that is going to be the premise there, that how China is India's primary challenge, not yet an enemy, because there are some movement forward that has happened. But we have to be aware that China will never want India to rise the way it is rising, because it sees India as the only possible rival in Asia, and probably going forward globally.
Okay. As much as we have a neighborhood which is very volatile, we've seen things change so rapidly, for example, in Bangladesh. I want to talk a little bit about the external pressures because Pakistan, China are part of that. If we add the other pressures we are facing, and then later on we'll come to the internal problems.
Sure. So, Indian neighborhood is not easy. It's never been. There are two reasons for it. One is India's size is so disproportionately large compared to India's neighbors that they will always fear India. Either India will subsume them, India will dominate them. So that has been a consistent thread in the discourse in the Indian subcontinent. Bangladesh was always moving towards it. It always had nearly 40% of the population which was anti-India, pro-Pakistan, historically from 1971. So what has happened is not a surprise to many people. Whether it could have happened later, maybe not as early as what happened in August 2024. That's the question that everybody is debating, but that's gone now in the past. Similarly, we've seen that thing in Sri Lanka in 2022, where a peaceful country like that, which had a 15 years of peace or 13 years of peace from 2009 onwards, suddenly erupted in a civil disobedience and a kind of orchestrated protest in a way that will happen. So India is aware. Nepal oscillates between India and China. Maldives oscillates between India and China. So I have always said this, and I want to sort of bring it out in the book also, that strategic affairs is a game which has no clear victory or defeat. Because if you look at just the example of Maldives, for instance, 2013 to 18, there was a pro-China government. 2018, India managed to get a pro-India government. It remained in power till 2023. In 2023, an blatantly anti-India fellow became the president of Maldives. But within a year and a half, he had to come asking for help from India. So, this goes on. It's a continuous game. One should never look at markers, definite markers in this. India has adapted it. It needs to be a little more fleet-footed, a little more aware of what's happening in the neighborhood. But I think overall, like if you look at the extended neighborhood, BIMSTEC, Prime Minister, as we are speaking today on the 11th of March, Prime Minister is in Mauritius, completing 10 years of his Sagar vision, security and growth for all in the region. So the extended neighborhood, Indian Ocean, all that. So I think on balance again, there will be pluses and minuses, but at least, there is a proactive. You go wherever, people say India is at least walking the talk in certain senses. Certain failures are there. We can say Bangladesh, we didn't anticipate. You didn't anticipate Sri Lanka, all that. But India was the only one to help Sri Lanka with $4 billion of aid that way. So that's where India comes in. I mean, the size really becomes a disadvantage. And no backyard today, in my view, and that is one of the things that I'm going to say in the book. No big country's backyard is safe for that country. You look at Australia, they are getting increasingly getting competition from China in the Pacific. The US has fights with Mexico and Canada, which is supposed to be its backyard. Doesn't happen. China or Russia is facing problems in Central Asia. China may be sort of in control of ASEAN, but it also faces pushback there. So I think we have to be aware of the uncertain times in the global affairs right now, which is happening everywhere.
If we come to within India, left-wing extremism is something you talked about. I want you to talk a little about that. And can we also look at how things have changed over the last 10 years? Because there was a time that you would see headlines regularly, and that's not happening anymore.
True, left-wing extremism or Naxalism, it will never go away for various reasons of social reality in those areas, backwardness, also the society, the way it is structured, all that. So there will always be poverty, there will always be dispossessed people who will be cannon fodder for the militants or the left-wing extremists. But what the government has cleverly done, and this started way back in 2009, the fruits are being visible today. But there was Operation Green Hunt at one point. Then post-2015, this government has focused on two-pronged approach, development and hard crackdown on the elements, the extremist elements. That has paid huge dividends to them, as we can see. The area of influence of the left-wing extremists has shrunk dramatically. They have also gotten old, because when they started getting into insurgency and they launched the insurgency, they were younger people, they were committed people, but today things change. So I think that can be measured as a very quantifiable success as far as Naxalism is concerned. And I think the Home Minister has already said that by 2026 he will completely eradicate Naxalism from India, which can be tested when it comes. But as I said, the roots always remain. Like if you go back to Sri Lanka, the mindset or the state of mind amongst some of the Tamils who are radical and who are very staunch supporters of Tamil nationalism in the north of Sri Lanka will always say LTT will come back in one form or the other. So Naxals can also come back in one form or the other, but we'll see what happens there.
Of course, we can't not ask you about Kashmir. And how much of a role has what happened on August 5, 2019 played in that? And there were so many apprehensions when that decision was taken. How was that played out?
The first 6 months was a brilliant success. The way it was planned, the way it was kept secret, not a single drop of blood there, wasted, or there's no bloodshed. Because people said Kashmir will burn, but Kashmir will go up in arms when you abrogate Article 370. All that didn't happen because there's meticulous planning by the government. All arms of the government played up very well. The armed forces, the bureaucracy, the politicians, everyone played up. Now, having done that and 2 union territories created, now what probably didn't go through as should have gone is similar follow-up of the same quality, of the highest standards of trying to give them projects, give them employment, give them political space. That political space has been given, as we can see, fair elections. Their opponent in the government, the central government's opponent, is in power in Kashmir now, in Jammu and Kashmir. But that region also has, like my old Karm Bhumi, as I call it, Northeast, a chip on their shoulder a little bit, that we are always discriminated against, we are neglected. That will remain. I would have liked little more effort from the government, central government, to make sure that the fruits of abrogation of Article 370 were visible and were more evenly distributed to the population, rather than what we are in a kind of a, I would say, middling success as far as that particular decision is concerned. But there is scope for improvement always for any decision, because it was a very bold and very historic decision, which again time will test its efficacy, how it will go.
And let's then move on to your Karma Bhumi, the Northeast. There were many accords that this government worked very hard on. But one of the things that constantly stands out now is the question of Manipur.
Finally, they've moved on Manipur. I have said this to many people from there, friends from there. Many friends who said, why are you not writing, why are you not commenting on Manipur? I said it's a simple emotional problem or a challenge, because I have friends on both sides of the so-called divide between the Meiteis and the Kukis. And whatever I say, if I had said, it would have hurt one side or the other. So I kept quiet. I've been speaking to people, and I think more than that, I think what the government also realized, that it was being obdurate and it was not paying any dividends. So they have corrected themselves. They have sent a trusted bureaucrat, retired bureaucrat as a governor. The armed forces are now, again regaining some of the control. And I think even the society, every insurgency or every movement like this, violent movement that happens or agitation that happens, has its shelf life or has a life of its own. So it peters out. And people would have also got fatigued with all the violence and uncertainty and the way they were living in fear. But the scars will take a lot of time to heal. And I've seen similar, on a smaller scale, similar conflagration in the 90s when the Kukis and the Nagas clashed. And it went on for 3 years. And this year also, I mean, if you can see Manipur, I mean, Meitei and Kukis, they've also gone on for 3 years. But rest of the region has fortunately remained calm, peaceful, is moving towards development. Again, there'll be nuances in that. Like I was actually in Assam, and we were talking about big dams in Arunachal Pradesh. China is building something in Tibet. India is also building some dams. Whether that's the model we should follow is a concern that environmentalists have, because it's impacting the environment there, the rivers, the forest and everything. But also you need power, you need development, you need money. So, it's a balance that you have to strike between that. So, Northeast, I would think from my time, I left Northeast in 2006, so almost 20 years ago. From then to now has progressed tremendously. If you see the markers of progress, that is infrastructure, connectivity, people's easy access to rest of the country, and rest of the country people going to the Northeast, and also the amalgamation of people studying and working on both sides. That has happened. I'm quite happy with what's happened in the Northeast, except for this Manipur thing, like you said.
Okay. When we talk of power, and there is also a soft power that we talk of, and the soft powers, including those who don't reside in the country. At one point in time, the Indian diaspora was never really catered to. I think there was a lot of anger even within people who stay in India, who think that they abandoned the country and they went out for better opportunities. But you feel that there is a real power in the Indian diaspora.
Of course it is. And in fact, a veteran diplomat, G. Parthasarthi, a former High Commissioner to Pakistan, told me this when I was writing the first book on the Modi government's policies. He said, the one difference that I see, two differences he said. One is that India has isolated Pakistan in the Islamic world by becoming friendly with the Gulf countries. So the Act West policy has been more successful. And coming to the diaspora, he said he's used diaspora as a strategic tool, soft power. And because they are successful in countries like the UK, then the US, even elsewhere, smaller countries you go to. I mean, you now go to Mauritius. Mauritius, 70% people are from Indian origin or are of Indian origin. You go to Africa, you go any place you go. Like there's an old joke they used to say about the Malayalis, that if you go to the moon, you will have a idli sambar joint there. But I think the Indians are everywhere. If you go and if you look at the way Indians are going out and doing their stuff, making waves, sometimes making nuisance. But it is a power which cannot be denied. I mean, they are playing a role in political dispensations in some countries, as we can see. So I think Prime Minister Modi has actually homed down to that very early in his tenure. Not now, but 2015-16. And some people might see it as overly dramatic and all the things that he does with the diaspora. But that's the way he keeps them engaged and keeps them invested in India, both emotionally and otherwise.
You mentioned 2015, and one of the conscious decisions that the Prime Minister had taken then was to go to the UAE. And that has been a major part of his foreign policy too.
Exactly. That's what I said. I mean, I was quoting then G. Parthasarthi, but now you look at the evidence. Today, India's relationship with the Saudis, with UAE, with Qatar, with Kuwait, with Oman, and Iran, Iraq, Israel, West Asia as a larger construct. India is probably one of the most sought after countries. They also want to invest here. They have the money. They are looking at it. And it's a very conscious effort on the Prime Minister's part to do this. And I have detailed this in my first book, how this came about. He was on a plane back from, he was traveling within Central Asian republics, 4 or 5 of them, Turkmenistan to Kazakhstan or somewhere he is going. On the plane, he asked NSA Ajit Doval that in the Gulf we have some 70 lakh or 80 lakh people Indian origin. So what are we doing about it? How are we, sort of taking care of them? And how are we making sure that they also contribute to Indian success? So he said, no, we have to sort of go and talk to people more, and we need to change our policy and not just look at those people sending remittances, but also get them invested. So Ajit Doval went from that place, from that tour, after ending the tour, straight to Dubai and other places. And then it started off as a process where Prime Minister has succeeded. Today he goes and receives the Qatar Emir at the airport, calls him my brother, he calls MBS my brother. So these are things that you don't see normally in Indian politics. You didn't see normally, but he's doing it. So that's a big success, I would think, which has not given enough attention. People talk about Act East, which is also a mixed bag, I would say. But again, Indonesia and getting ASEAN countries to come here, Myanmar. And so, like I said, not everything will be success or successful when you touch it. But effort is important. And I think the Prime Minister has invested his personal goodwill, political capital in doing all this, which is what needs to be documented very well. And that's what I'm trying to do. Others have done it. Maybe I will also add to that literature. But I just want to give some unique insights I may get by talking to different people, access to some people who are no longer in the positions of decision making, but who may be willing to speak to me, even if off the record.
All right. Thank you so much. Looking forward to not just the first one of this year, but the others too.
Thank you.
Thank you.